The dispute between Elon Musk and Sam Altman over OpenAI's shift to a for-profit model heading to court today. And joining us right now is Tim Higgins, Wall Street Journal business columnist, a CNBC contributor. It all goes down, so here it's going to start. The question, Tim, is how do you handicap this situation in terms of what the permutations or possible outcomes of this could actually be?
Well, legal experts seem to think that Elon Musk has an uphill battle, that it's unlikely that he's going to win. That said, I would almost argue that in a lot of ways he has already won. If you look at kind of the year ahead, Elon Musk is going to taking SpaceX public, an IPO, kind of framing it as an AI company. OpenAI also has ambitions of going public later this year, possibly, and he's beating them to the market. They've got this kind of cloud hanging over them, OpenAI does, and that's in a lot of ways that's thanks to him. He spent the last 2 years really kicking up a lot of dust, questioning kind of Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, questioning kind of his ethics, which is not a fun thing to be doing as you go into an IPO.
Well, Tim, that's what I was going to ask. How much of this do you think is part of effectively or will have the impact of damaging the reputations of the characters and the character of the individuals involved in this ahead of this IPO? And how damaging, by the way, could it be also potentially to even Elon?
Yeah, I think a lot of people know who Elon Musk is at this point, right? So it's hard to imagine there's going to be anything that's too revelatory about who he is as a person. There could be lots of interesting nuggets that get a lot of attention, but I think for a lot of people, they know who Musk is. Sam Altman, that's a different story. Here in San Francisco, where I am, people know him, right? He is one of the rising princelings, if you will, in the tech ecosystem. Outside of San Francisco, outside of tech, he's still, I think, relatively new to a lot of people. And Musk, for his credit, for the past couple of years, has helped frame how people think of who Sam Altman is. And of course, Altman doesn't like that framing. He is very vocal in arguing that he is out there trying to do good with OpenAI, that AI can be a force of good. And that's in this backdrop of at a time when people are concerned what AI is all about.
Where are you more broadly on the IPO of OpenAI later this year and the growth of Anthropic versus OpenAI and where you think Gemini is and everything else?
Yeah, you talk about all the players here, right? You got Google out there. And it's interesting because OpenAI, created by Musk and Altman out of concerns about Google's kind of ambitions in that space and wanting to have something to kind of counter them. Now they're fighting each other. And you got Anthropic clearly being very aggressive as it moves towards its own IPO, taking some of the steam, benefiting perhaps from some of this chaos that OpenAI is seeing with Musk. So, a great spectacle for the year ahead in the AI race to raise money. And that's really kind of what's going on here is this never-ending need for cash to buy compute power to fuel the AI growth.
Right. Interestingly, there's a lot of big tech companies that have a huge stake in the future of OpenAI. So NVIDIA's got a piece of the action. Amazon just got a piece of the action. Microsoft, of course, is one of the original investors and backers in OpenAI. So they have a huge piece of the action. How much are they watching this?
Oh, huge, right? We're expecting perhaps the Microsoft CEO might have to testify here in this case. The potential that OpenAI's that their nonprofit could be kind of change the terms of that and kind of gum up the works of an IPO would have effects for these backers of them and just complicate that kind of future that they were betting on.
What do you think about some of the speculation that the outcome of this could change the actual management of OpenAI in the end?
Well, that's what Musk would like, right? He would like Sam kicked out. That's clearly one of his goals. That's to be determined here. The jury is going to decide the liability, and then the judge is going to decide the remedies. And that's going to be an interesting thing to watch. This is a no-nonsense judge, Judge Gonzalez-Rogers. She's been involved in a lot of huge tech cases over the years. I think about the Apple and Epic antitrust case a number of years ago. She had Tim Cook in her courtroom, and she was pretty tough on him. It'll be interesting to see how she deals with Altman and how she deals with Musk.
But even beyond that, you've seen some speculation online and elsewhere about just some of the challenges inside of OpenAI. There's even been chatter I've seen about the possibility that Brett Taylor, who's the chairman of the company, that maybe they try to buy his company and bring him in to help manage the business as well.
That's part of this kind of overarching narrative. Is Sam Altman the CEO to be overseeing this company as a public company, right? He is clearly an operator, clearly a very good fundraiser, helped build up the narrative around OpenAI as this future behemoth in the AI space. Now the question is he the guy to be running things as a publicly traded company, which is a different skill set, it's a different kind of mentality, and you see it a lot here in Silicon Valley. The questions of, do founders make good CEOs down the road? Now, if you look at Tesla, if you look at SpaceX, people are probably pretty happy that Musk was there at the early days and he's there now. That's kind of the constant kind of battle here in the Valley.